The little girl's bare feet left blood in the snow. She clutched a baby against her chest, shivering so hard her teeth clicked together. Behind her, a woman in chains stood on an auction block while men laughed and bid $5 for her life. The girl pushed through the crowd until she found him, a tall stranger with sad eyes and a worn coat. She grabbed his sleeve with frozen fingers. "Please, mister, buy us before they do. We'll be good. I promise we'll be so good." If you believe that love can find its way through the darkest winters, subscribe now and stay with this story until the very end. Comment below and tell me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this journey travels. Caleb Thornton didn't believe in God anymore. 7 years ago, he'd watched a boarding house burn to ash with his wife inside. He'd screamed her name until his throat bled. He'd dug through smoking rubble with bare hands, pulling out blackened beams and shattered glass, searching for something, anything that proved she'd survived. He found her wedding ring, nothing else. After that, Caleb stopped praying, stopped hoping, stopped living, really. He moved to Montana, bought a ranch nobody wanted, and spent 7 years talking to horses because they didn't ask questions. Today he'd come to Blackwater Junction for feed. Just feed. The trading post sat crooked against the winter sky, its wooden beams groaning under fresh snow. Caleb tied his horse and walked toward the supply store, head down, shoulders hunched against the cold. That's when he heard the laughter. Not good laughter. The kind that made his gut twist. He stopped. A crowd had gathered near a raised wooden platform. Maybe 40 men. Some women too, their breath fogging in the frozen air. A man in a black bowler hat stood on the platform, banging a gavel against a crate. "Come on now, gentlemen. Don't be shy. Next lot coming up." Caleb should have kept walking. He didn't. He pushed through the crowd until he could see. On the platform stood a woman, thin, shaking. Her wrists were bound with rope so tight the skin had split, leaving dried blood crusted around the edges. Her dress was gray, torn at the shoulder, hanging off her frame like it belonged to someone else. Her hair fell tangled across her face, hiding everything. Beside her, 2 children. A girl, maybe 4 years old. Red hair matted with dirt and melted snow. No shoes. Her feet were raw, cracked, bloody. She held a baby wrapped in what looked like a flour sack, pressing it against her chest, like she was trying to share the last warmth in her body. "Woman's good for cleaning, cooking, whatever you need," the auctioneer said, grinning. "Comes with 2 young ones. Girl can work in a few years. Baby's quiet. Starting bid $10. Someone in the back laughed. $10. For that skinny thing, I'll give you 3. More laughter. $5. Another man shouted. "But only if she don't talk back." The crowd roared. Caleb's hands curled into fists. The woman on the platform didn't react, didn't lift her head, didn't flinch. She just stood there, gripping her daughter's hand so tight her knuckles had gone white. But the little girl. The little girl was looking at him, straight at him. Her eyes were brown. Too old for her face, too tired, too knowing. She stared at Caleb for a long moment, studying him like she was trying to decide something important. Then she moved. She pulled free from her mother's grip and stepped to the edge of the platform. The auctioneer didn't notice. The crowd didn't notice. But Caleb noticed. She climbed down the steps one at a time, her bloody feet leaving prints on the wood. She walked through the crowd. Men stepped aside without thinking, barely glancing at the small figure pushing past their legs. She stopped in front of Caleb, looked up at him. "Mister?" Her voice was barely a whisper, scratchy, like she hadn't had water in days. "Mister, please." Caleb couldn't move. "Buy us." The baby in her arms stirred, whimpered. She bounced it gently, automatically, like she'd done it 1,000 times. "We won't be no trouble. I can clean. I can cook a little. Mama taught me. And my brother." She held the baby up slightly. "He don't cry much. He's real good. Please, mister." Caleb's throat closed. Please, before the bad men take us. They hurt Mama. They'll hurt us too. I seen the way they look at her." She reached out and grabbed his coat sleeve. Her fingers were so cold he could feel it through the leather. "Your eyes look sad," she said quietly. "But not mean. Sad's okay. Mean ain't. Please, mister. We ain't got nobody else to ask." Caleb looked at her, at the blood on her feet, at the baby shivering in her arms, at the hope in her eyes, fragile, desperate, barely surviving. He thought about his wife. He thought about the child they'd never had. He thought about 7 years of silence and snow and nothing. "Stay here," he said. His voice sounded strange, rough, like he'd forgotten how to use it. He walked toward the platform. $15. The auctioneer's gavel stopped mid-swing. The crowd went quiet. "What's that?" the auctioneer said. 15. For the woman and the children. Whispers rippled through the crowd. A man near the front, thick mustache, gold watch chain, expensive coat, turned to look at Caleb. "Well now," the man said. "Competition." He smiled. The kind of smile that made Caleb want to break something. $20, the man said. 25. 30. Caleb reached into his coat, pulled out his money, counted it with numb fingers. $37. Everything he had. Winter feed money. Survival money. 35, the man said. 40. The man's smile flickered. 45. Caleb looked at him. Really looked. 50. He didn't have 50. He had 37. But something in his voice made the man hesitate. $50, the auctioneer repeated, eyebrows raised. Going once. The man with the gold watch studied Caleb for a long moment. His eyes were calculating cold. Then he shrugged. "Keep her. She's more trouble than she's worth anyway. Woman tried to run twice. Nearly broke my brother's arm before he died." He turned and walked away, his boots crunching in the snow. "Sold." The gavel cracked like a gunshot. $50 to the gentleman in brown. Pay up and collect your property. Caleb walked to the platform. His hands were shaking as he counted out $37 and set it on the auctioneer's crate. "That's only 37, the auctioneer said. "It's what I have." "You bid 50. Caleb leaned closer. His voice dropped low. "You want to make a problem out of this, in front of all these people, when I just stopped a woman and 2 children from being sold to a man who, what did he say, whose brother she nearly killed defending herself." The auctioneer's smile faded. 37, Caleb said. "Take it." A long pause. The auctioneer grabbed the money. "Get them out of here. I don't want no trouble." Caleb climbed the steps to the platform. The woman still hadn't lifted her head. She was shaking harder now, her whole body trembling beneath the thin shawl. Caleb pulled his knife. She flinched, drew back. Her hands flew up to protect her face. "Easy," Caleb said quietly. "I ain't gonna hurt you. Just cutting the rope." He waited. Slowly she lowered her hands. He cut the ropes from her wrists. They fell into the snow-stained rust brown with dried blood. "Can you walk?" he asked. She nodded once, still didn't look up. The little girl appeared at the bottom of the steps, the baby clutched against her chest. "Come on, Mama," she said. "The nice man's taking us home." The wagon waited at the edge of the camp. Caleb helped the woman up first. She weighed nothing. He could feel her bones through the thin dress. Then he lifted the girl and the baby together. Set them on the bench beside their mother. Covered all 3 with the wool blanket he kept for cold nights, the one Eleanor had made years ago before everything ended. He didn't think about that. He climbed up front and took the reins. "My name's Caleb," he said, not turning around. "Got a ranch about 3 hours north. It ain't fancy, but it's warm. Got food. You'll be safe." No response. He flicked the reins. The horses moved. Snow began to fall. For a long time, nobody spoke. The only sounds were hoofbeats and the creak of wooden wheels and the soft whistle of wind through pine trees. Then the girl's voice, small and careful. "Mr. Caleb." "Yeah." "Where are we going?" "Home." "Your home." "Our home." "If you want it." Silence. "What if we don't want it?" Caleb turned slightly. The girl was watching him, her brown eyes serious. "Then I'll take you wherever you want to go," he said. "But you'd be doing me a kindness if you stayed a while. Place gets lonely." The girl considered this. "Mama," she said, "did you hear he said we can stay?" The woman didn't answer, but her hand moved slowly across the bench until it found her daughter's shoulder and squeezed. "My name's Lily," the girl said. "Like the flower. Mama named me that because lilies come back every spring even when winter's real bad. She said that's what she wanted me to be, something that don't give up." "That's a good name," Caleb said. "Thank you. This here's my brother." She adjusted the baby in her arms. "He don't got a name yet. Mama said we'd give him one when we found somewhere safe." "Well." Caleb looked ahead at the snow-covered trail. "Maybe you found it." Lily nodded slowly. "Maybe we did." Bored. An hour into the journey, the storm hit. It came fast, one moment, light snowfall the next, a wall of white, so thick Caleb couldn't see the horse's ears. Wind screamed through the trees, rocking the wagon, clawing at the blanket covering the woman and children. "Hold on!" Caleb shouted over the gale. "There's a ridge ahead. We can shelter there." The horses struggled forward. Snow piled against the wheels, slowing them, stopping them. The wagon lurched. Stuck. Caleb jumped down into snow up to his knees. He tried pushing, tried pulling. The wheels wouldn't budge. "We gotta walk," he said, climbing back up. "It's not far, half a mile, maybe less. There's a rock overhang, we can wait out the worst of it there." The woman was already moving. She climbed down, pulling her shawl tight, and reached up for the children. "I'll carry the baby," Caleb said. "You take Lily." For the first time, the woman's head lifted. "No." Her voice was rough, damaged, like something had scraped it raw. "No," she said again. "I carry my children." She took Lily in one arm, the baby in the other, and started walking. Caleb stared after her for a moment. Then he grabbed the emergency pack from under the wagon seat and followed. The half-mile felt like 10. Wind cut through Caleb's coat like it wasn't there. Snow stung his eyes, filled his boots, turned his fingers numb inside his gloves. Twice, he stumbled. Once he fell. But he kept his eyes on the woman ahead of him. She walked without stopping, without slowing. The children clutched against her chest. Her thin body bent against the wind, like a tree refusing to break. Caleb had known strong men who would have given up in this storm. She didn't even pause. Finally, the ridge appeared through the white. A rock overhang jutted out from the hillside, creating a natural shelter, just deep enough to block the wind. They staggered inside. Caleb immediately set to work, gathering what dry brush he could find, piling it against the back wall, striking flint until a small flame caught and grew. The woman sat with her back against the rock, Lily on one side, the baby on the other. She was shaking violently now, her lips blue, her wet dress clinging to her bones. "Here." Caleb pulled off his coat and held it out. She didn't take it. "Ma'am, you'll freeze to death." "And you won't." "I run hot. Please." She looked at the coat, at him. Something shifted in her eyes, suspicion warring with desperation. She took it, wrapped it around herself and the children. The baby started crying weak, hungry cries that echoed off the stone walls. "He needs to eat," Lily said quietly. "Mama ain't got nothing to give him, not for 2 days now." Caleb dug through his pack, found a canteen of water and a strip of dried beef. He chewed the beef until it was soft, then mixed it with water in his palm and held it out. "Try this. Won't fill him up, but it might quiet him." Lily took the mixture carefully, dipped her finger in it. Let the baby suck. The crying stopped. "Thank you," Lily whispered. Caleb nodded. He sat across from them, feeding sticks to the small fire, watching the flames dance. Outside, the storm raged. Inside, the silence stretched. "You didn't have to do this," the woman said finally. Caleb looked up. It was the most she'd said since the auction. "No," he agreed. "I didn't." "Then why?" He thought about lying. Thought about saying something noble or righteous. Instead, he told the truth. 7 years ago, my wife died in a fire. Or I thought she died. They found a body, found her ring. I buried what was left and moved out here to forget. I haven't done much of anything since. Just existed. He poked the fire with a stick. When your girl came up to me when she asked me to buy you, something happened. I don't know what. I just knew I couldn't walk away. Couldn't watch and do nothing. Not again. The woman was quiet for a long time. Then, your wife. What was her name? Eleanor. Caleb's voice caught on the word. Eleanor Margaret Thornton. She was a teacher before we married. Smartest woman I ever knew. Stubborn, too. Used to say... He stopped. The woman had gone rigid. Lily was staring at her mother with wide eyes. "Mama?" Lily said. "Mama, what's wrong?" The woman's hand moved slowly to her chest. She pulled something out from beneath her dress, a small locket on a thin chain, tarnished and dented. Her fingers trembled as she opened it. She held it toward the fire. Inside was a tiny daguerreotype, faded and cracked, but clear enough. A man and a woman on their wedding day. The man was Caleb. The woman was, "Oh my God!" Caleb breathed. He lunged forward, snatched the locket, held it up to the firelight with shaking hands. It was their wedding photograph. The only copy. He'd thought it burned with everything else. He looked at the woman. Really looked. Past the tangled hair, past the bruises, past the hollow cheeks and the shadowed eyes. And he saw her. Eleanor. His voice cracked on the name, broke on it. The woman Eleanor, his wife, his dead wife. She was crying, silent tears streaming down her face, catching firelight, turning gold. "Caleb," she whispered. "I thought you were dead. They told me you were dead. They said, I'm not dead." He grabbed her hands, held them like they were the only real thing in the world. "Eleanor, Eleanor, look at me. I'm right here. I'm alive. You're alive. How is this? Mama." Lily's voice was small, scared. "Mama, who is this man? Why are you crying?" Eleanor turned to her daughter, pulled her close. Her voice shook. "Lily, this is Caleb Thornton. He is..." She looked at Caleb, and something broke open in her face. "He's your father." The fire crackled, the storm howled, and the world rearranged itself around 3 words. Nobody slept that night. They huddled together in the shelter while the blizzard screamed outside, and Eleanor told her story in pieces, broken fragments that didn't come easy. The night of the fire. Men in her room. A rag over her face. Waking in a wagon tied down, heading west. "They told me you died in the fire," she whispered. "Said you went in looking for me, and the roof collapsed. I believed them. I wanted to die too." Caleb's jaw tightened. His hand found hers in the dark. "I was already carrying Lily when they took me. Didn't even know yet. By the time I realized..." She swallowed. "By the time I realized I was already sold. To a man in Wyoming. His name was Jonas Webb." She said the name like it was poison. "He wasn't kind, but I survived. For her." She looked at Lily, who had fallen asleep against her shoulder. "Everything I did for her. And when she was 3, Jonas's brother came to visit. Ezra Webb. He was worse. He..." Her voice broke. Caleb pulled her closer. You don't have to. I want to. She took a shaky breath. I want you to know. All of it. So there's no secrets between us. She told him about the baby. About Jonas dying a fall down the stairs after he raised his hand to Lily. About Ezra claiming her and the children as debt property. About running, being caught, being dragged to the auction. I didn't think anyone would... She stopped, started again. I prayed someone good would buy us, someone who would at least be kind to the children. I never imagined. Me. You. They sat in silence for a long moment. The man at the auction, Caleb said. The one who was bidding against me. That was Ezra. Yes. He'll come looking. Yes. Caleb nodded slowly. His face was calm. Too calm. Let him come, he said. Caleb. I spent 7 years believing you were dead. 7 years lighting a candle under your photograph every night. 7 years talking to a ghost. And all that time you were alive, suffering. Alone. He turned to face her. The firelight caught his eyes, and something burned there that hadn't burned in a long, long time. I failed you once, Eleanor. I let them take you. I didn't search hard enough. I gave up. I won't fail you again. Not you. Not Lily. Not this baby. He looked at the infant still nameless sleeping in his mother's arms. Nobody is taking this family from me. You understand, nobody. Eleanor stared at him, and for the first time in 7 years she smiled. Small, fragile, but real. I understand, she whispered. The storm broke just before dawn. They walked the last 2 miles to the ranch in pale blue light, their shadows stretching long across the snow. Caleb carried Lily, who was too exhausted to walk. Eleanor carried the baby Caleb's coat still wrapped around her shoulders. The cabin appeared through the trees. Small, simple. A log structure with a stone chimney. A covered porch, a barn, and stable nearby. Smoke still rose from the embers Caleb had left burning the day before. It ain't much, Caleb said. Eleanor looked at the cabin, at the porch, at the rocking chair by the door. It's perfect, she said. They went inside. Caleb built up the fire, found clean clothes, his clothes too big for her, but warm and dry. Made coffee, heated water for washing. Laid out bedding in the spare room. Eleanor moved through the space, slowly touching things. The kitchen table, the iron stove, the books on the shelf. You kept them, she said quietly, pulling out a worn copy of poetry. My books, from before. Everything I could save from the fire. Caleb's voice was rough. Wasn't much, but I couldn't let go of what was left. She opened the book. Inside the front cover in faded ink, for my darling Caleb. May we never run out of words. E. She closed her eyes. Eleanor. She turned. Caleb stood in the doorway holding something in his hands. A small wooden box polished dark with age. I was going to give this to you the night of the fire, he said. Our anniversary present. I found it in the rubble somehow. Kept it all these years. Waiting. I don't know what I was waiting for. He opened the box. Inside, nestled in faded velvet, was a ring. Gold with a small blue stone. It was my mother's, he said. I wanted you to have it. To wear alongside your wedding band. I never got the chance. Eleanor's hand went to her throat. To the thin chain where the locket hung. My wedding band, she whispered. They took it. First night they had me. Said I wasn't married anymore. Said I belonged to them now. Caleb crossed the room, took her hand, slipped the ring onto her finger. You belong to no one, he said. Not to them, not to me. But if you're willing, I'd like to belong to you. Again. Still. Always. Lily appeared in the doorway, rubbing sleep from her eyes. Mama, are we home now? Eleanor looked at her daughter, at the baby in her arms, at the man standing before her with tears in his eyes, and 7 years of grief lifting from his shoulders. "Yes, Lily," she said. "We're home." That night, after the children were asleep, Caleb sat on the porch. The stars were out, thousands of them scattered across the black sky like promises. The door opened behind him. Eleanor stepped out wrapped in a quilt and sat in the rocking chair beside him. Neither spoke for a long time. Then Eleanor said, "Ezra Webb is dangerous, Caleb. He has money, connections, men who do what he tells them. He won't just let us go." "I know." "What are we going to do?" Caleb looked at the stars. "Before the fire," he said slowly, "I was a circuit judge, rode from town to town holding court, upholding the law. I believed in justice back then, believed that doing the right thing mattered, that truth won." He paused. "When I thought you died, when I thought my verdict against Judge Warren got you killed, I stopped believing. Walked away from all of it. Told myself the law was a lie, that fighting only brought pain." Eleanor waited. "But now..." Caleb turned to face her. "Now I have something worth fighting for. And I'm done running, done hiding. Ezra Webb wants to come after this family, fine. Let him come. But he's not fighting a broken man with nothing to lose. He's fighting a man who just got everything back." He stood up, extended his hand. "We do this together, Eleanor, you and me, like we should have from the start." She took his hand. "Together," she agreed. They stood there in the starlight, side by side, two people who had been through fire and separation and 7 years of silence. The battle ahead would be hard, but they would face it the same way they faced the storm together. And this time, neither of them would let go. The first week passed like a held breath. Eleanor woke before dawn each morning, old habits carved deep by years of servitude. She would lie still in the darkness, listening for footsteps, waiting for commands that never came. Then she would remember where she was, and her chest would loosen just enough to breathe. Caleb gave her space. He understood something had broken inside her that couldn't be fixed with kindness alone. So he kept his distance during the day, working the horses, chopping wood, fixing the fence that had fallen during the blizzard. But every evening he sat with her by the fire, and they talked. Sometimes about the past. Sometimes about nothing at all. Sometimes they just sat in silence, and that was enough. Lily adapted faster than either of them expected. By the third day, she was following Caleb to the barn, asking questions about the horses, wanting to help with everything. She named the chestnut mare Penny, after her flour sack doll, and Caleb pretended that was the horse's name all along. "Mr. Caleb?" she asked one morning, watching him brush Penny's coat. "Yeah? Are you really my papa?" Caleb's hand stopped mid-stroke. He set down the brush and crouched to her level. "That's what your mama says." "But you didn't know about me, before." "No, I didn't." Lily considered this, her small face serious. "Are you mad that Mama didn't tell you?" "She couldn't tell me, Lily. Bad people kept her away. Kept both of you away. That wasn't her fault. And it sure wasn't yours. But are you happy that I'm here now?" Caleb looked at this little girl with her mother's red hair and her own fierce spirit. 4 years old, and she'd already survived more than most grown men. "Lily," he said quietly, "I spent 7 years thinking I had nothing left. No family. No reason to keep going. Then you walked up to me in that snow and asked me to buy you, and everything changed." He took her small hand in his. "I'm not mad. I'm not disappointed. I'm grateful. You understand? You and your mama and your brother, you're the best thing that's happened to me in a long, long time." Lily stared at him. Her lip trembled. Then she threw her arms around his neck and held on tight. "I wanted a papa," she whispered into his shoulder. "I prayed for one every night. Mama said God don't always answer prayers, but maybe sometimes he does." Caleb closed his eyes and held her. Maybe sometimes he does. He agreed. Eleanor watched from the cabin window, tears sliding down her cheeks. She didn't wipe them away. For the first time in years, they weren't tears of pain. The baby, still unnamed, grew stronger each day. Eleanor's milk had returned now that she was eating properly, and the infant's cries became less desperate, more ordinary. Hungry cries, tired cries, the normal sounds of a child who expected to be cared for. "We should name him," Caleb said one evening, watching Eleanor nurse the baby by the fire. "I know." She stroked the baby's dark hair. "I kept waiting. Didn't want to name him after his father. Didn't want that man's mark on him." "What about your father's name?" "Henry. Henry Sullivan." She tested it quietly. "Henry." "Henry Thornton," Caleb said. Eleanor looked up sharply. "If you want," Caleb added quickly. "I'm not trying to. I know he's not mine by blood. But if you wanted him to have—" "Yes." The word came out fierce. Certain. "Yes," Eleanor said again. "Henry Thornton. That's his name." Caleb nodded. Something settled in his chest, warm and solid. "Henry Thornton," he repeated. "Welcome to the family, son." The baby gurgled, milk-drunk and content, completely unaware that he'd just been claimed by a man who would die to protect him. But peace, Caleb knew, never lasted long. It was 10 days after the auction when the first sign of trouble came. Caleb had ridden into Cedar Hollow for supplies. The town was small, one main street, a general store, a blacksmith, a church with a crooked steeple. He'd avoided it for years, preferring solitude to the curious stares of strangers. Now he had mouths to feed. He tied his horse outside the general store and walked in. The bell above the door jangled. Behind the counter stood Ruth Brennan, a sturdy woman with gray-streaked hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. "Caleb Thornton," she said, eyebrows rising. "Haven't seen you in town since. When was it, last spring?" "Been busy." She watched him gather flour salt coffee beans. "Heard some interesting talk lately." Caleb didn't respond. "Heard you bought yourself a woman at the Blackwater auction. Her and 2 little ones." His jaw tightened. "People talk too much." "People do what people do." Ruth leaned against the counter. "Question is, what are you doing with them?" "Folks are curious. Man lives alone for 7 years, suddenly shows up with a ready-made family, raises questions." Caleb set his supplies on the counter. Met her eyes directly. "That woman is my wife, Eleanor Thornton. Everyone thought she died in the Kansas fire 7 years ago. She didn't. She was taken, held against her will, sold like property. I found her by accident and I brought her home." Ruth's expression shifted. The suspicion didn't disappear, but something else crept in. Interest, maybe, or the beginning of belief. "Your wife," she repeated. "My wife. And my daughter. And my son. The girl's yours." "She is now." Ruth studied him for a long moment. Then she began tallying his purchases. "Ezra Webb was in town yesterday," she said, not looking up. "Asking questions. Wanted to know if anyone had seen a red-haired woman with 2 children. Said she was a runaway debtor. Said there was a reward for information." Caleb's blood went cold. "What did you tell him?" "Told him I hadn't seen anyone matching that description." Ruth looked up. "Because I hadn't. Yet." Their eyes met. "Mrs. Brennan, I don't know your wife, Mr. Thornton. Don't know her story. But I know Ezra Webb. Knew his brother Jonas, too, before he died." Her voice hardened. "I know what kind of men they are. Were. And I know a woman running from men like that probably has good reason." She pushed his supplies across the counter. $3.50. Caleb paid. Started to gather his things. "Mr. Thornton." He stopped. "Webb's got friends in this town. Not everyone's going to see things the way I do. You might want to watch your back." I intend to. He left the store with his supplies and a weight in his chest that hadn't been there before. Ezra Webb was already hunting. That night, Caleb told Eleanor everything. She sat by the fire, Henry asleep in her arms, and listened without interrupting. When he finished, she was quiet for a long moment. "He won't stop," she said finally. "I told you. He's not the kind of man who lets things go. It's not about the money or the debt. It's about control, about winning." "Then we'll make sure he loses." "How?" Eleanor's voice cracked. "He has money, men, connections. What do we have? A cabin in the mountains and a half-broken fence. We have the truth. The truth." She laughed bitterly. "The truth is, I was sold legally. There are papers with my name on them. Documents that say I'm property. The law won't help us, Caleb. The law is what put me in chains in the first place." Caleb stood up, paced to the window, stared out at the darkness. "I used to be a judge," he said quietly. "Before the fire. I rode circuit through 3 territories, heard cases, issued rulings, sent men to prison. I believed in the system, believed that justice would prevail if good men stood up and fought for it." He turned to face her. "Then I lost you and I stopped believing, stopped fighting, ran away to the mountains and let the world rot. But Eleanor..." He crossed the room, knelt before her. "I can't run anymore. I won't. Not when I've just found you again." "What are you saying?" "I'm saying we fight. Not with guns, not unless we have to. We fight with the truth, your testimony, witnesses who knew you before, evidence of what was done to you. We build a case so strong that no court in the territory can ignore it. And if they ignore it anyway, then we keep fighting. We go higher. Federal courts, newspapers. We make so much noise that people have to listen." Eleanor shook her head slowly. "You make it sound so simple." "It won't be simple. It'll be the hardest thing either of us has ever done. But I'd rather fight and lose than hide and let them win." She looked at him, this man she'd loved and lost and found again. The same stubborn jaw, the same fierce eyes. 7 years older, scarred by grief, but still the same man who'd once promised to build her a life worth living. "All right," she whispered. "We fight." Caleb took her hand, pressed it to his lips. "We fight," he agreed. From the doorway, a small voice. "Are the bad men coming?" They turned. Lily stood there in her nightgown, her eyes wide with fear. Eleanor opened her arms. "Come here, sweetheart." Lily ran to her mother, climbed into her lap beside Henry. "I heard you talking," she said. "About fighting. About the man from the auction. Is he coming to take us back?" Caleb moved closer, crouched down so he was at Lily's level. "Listen to me, Lily. Nobody is taking you anywhere. Not that man, not anyone. You understand? But what if he brings lots of people? What if he has guns? Then I'll have guns too. What if he tries to hurt Mama? He won't get close enough." Lily's lip trembled. "Promise?" Caleb looked at Eleanor, at Henry sleeping peacefully, at this little girl who'd already seen too much darkness for her short life. "I promise," he said. "On my life, Lily. On everything I am. Nobody hurts this family, not while I'm breathing." Lily studied his face the way she had at the auction, searching for truth, for safety, for something to believe in. She found it. "Okay," she said quietly. She leaned forward and kissed his cheek. "I believe you, Papa." It was the first time she'd called him that. Caleb's throat closed. He couldn't speak, could barely breathe. Eleanor's hand found his shoulder, squeezed gently. "Come on, Lily," she said softly. "Back to bed. It's late. Will you sing the song you used to sing before the bad times?" Eleanor hesitated. Then she nodded. Caleb watched them go, his wife, his daughter, his son, and something shifted inside him. Something that had been frozen for 7 years finally cracked and thawed. He had a family again. And God help anyone who tried to take them away. 3 days later, Doc Henry Ashford came to visit. Caleb had known the old doctor for years, one of the few people in the territory he considered a friend. Ashford had tended to Caleb's injuries more times than either of them could count, and he'd never asked questions that weren't his business. He rode up to the cabin around noon, his medical bag strapped to his saddle, his white hair wild from the wind. "Heard some rumors," he said, dismounting stiffly. "Thought I'd see for myself." "Come inside. Coffee's hot." Ashford followed him in. Stopped short when he saw Eleanor at the table, Henry in her arms. "Well," he said slowly. "Well. Doc, this is Eleanor. My wife." "Your wife?" Ashford's eyebrows climbed toward his hairline. "The wife everyone said died in a fire 7 years ago." "The same." "I see." He walked closer, studying Eleanor with professional interest. "Ma'am, I'm Henry Ashford, town doctor. I've known Caleb here since he first moved to these parts. Mind if I take a look at you and the children, just to make sure everyone's healthy?" Eleanor glanced at Caleb. He nodded. "All right," she said quietly. Ashford examined her thoroughly, but gently checking her eyes, her pulse the healing wounds on her wrists. His expression grew grimmer with each passing minute. "These rope burns are recent," he said. "Past few weeks. And this bruising on your ribs, someone hit you. Hard, multiple times." "Her previous situation was not kind," Caleb said flatly. "I can see that." Ashford moved on to Lily, who submitted to his examination with suspicious eyes, but didn't protest. "Child's malnourished but otherwise healthy. Feet are healing well. She's resilient, this one." "She is," Eleanor agreed. Finally, the baby. Ashford held Henry, carefully checking his reflexes, his breathing, his eyes. "Good, strong boy," he pronounced. "Bit small for his age, but he'll catch up now that he's getting proper feeding." He handed Henry back to Eleanor. "You're all going to be fine, physically at least. The rest?" He glanced at Caleb. "The rest takes time." "We have time," Caleb said. Ashford settled into a chair, accepting the coffee Caleb offered. He drank deeply, then fixed Caleb with a steady gaze. "I heard Ezra Webb was in town." "I heard that too." "He's trouble, Caleb. Serious trouble. His brother was bad enough, but Ezra's worse, smarter, more patient. And he holds grudges like other men hold on to gold." "I'm aware." "Are you? Because I also heard he's been talking to Sheriff Rawlings, showing papers. Claims Mrs. Thornton here is a runaway debtor. Says he has legal right to reclaim her and the children." Eleanor's hand tightened on Henry. Lily, who had been playing quietly in the corner, went still. "Those papers are forged," Caleb said. "Every one of them. Eleanor was never in debt. She was kidnapped, held against her will, sold like livestock." "I believe you. But Sheriff Rawlings might not. He's not a bad man, but he follows the letter of the law, and if Webb's papers look official enough, then we'll prove they're forgeries." "How?" Caleb leaned forward. "You knew me before Doc, knew what I did. I was a circuit judge for 8 years. I know how the law works. I know how to build a case, gather evidence, present testimony. We're not fighting this with guns. We're fighting it with truth." Ashford studied him for a long moment. "You really think you can win against a man like Webb?" "I have to. There's no other option." The old doctor sighed, rubbed his eyes with weathered hands. "All right," he said finally. "What do you need?" "Witnesses. Anyone who knew Eleanor before the fire. Anyone who can testify she was taken against her will. Anyone who's seen how Webb treats the people he owns. And I need you to document everything: her injuries, the children's condition. Make it official. Put your name on it." Ashford nodded slowly. "I can do that." "There's one more thing." "Name it." Caleb glanced at Eleanor, at Lily, at Henry. "If something happens to me, if Webb or his men come when I'm not here, I need someone to protect them." Get them somewhere safe. Can I count on you? Ashford's expression softened. Caleb, I've been doctoring in this territory for 30 years. Seen a lot of men make a lot of promises. Most of them don't mean half of what they say. He leaned forward. But you mean every word. I can see it in your eyes. Same look you had when you used to sit on that bench and hand down justice to men who thought they were above it. He extended his hand. You can count on me. Whatever you need, whenever you need it. Caleb shook his hand firmly. Thank you, Doc. Don't thank me yet. This fight's just getting started. That evening after Ashford left, Eleanor found Caleb on the porch. He was sitting in the rocking chair, staring at the mountains in the distance. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink and gold. She sat beside him in the other chair, the one that had been empty for 7 years. You really think we can win this? She asked quietly. I don't know. He was honest, always honest with her. Webb has money power connections. We have us, and a few people willing to help. That doesn't sound like winning odds. It's not. He turned to look at her. But I've seen plenty of cases where the wrong side had all the advantages. Sometimes they still lost. Because the truth has a way of coming out, Eleanor, no matter how hard people try to bury it. And if it doesn't, if the truth stays buried. Caleb was quiet for a moment. Then we run, he said finally. We take the children and we disappear. New names, new territory. Start over somewhere Webb can't find us. You'd give up your home, everything you've built here, in a heartbeat. He reached over and took her hand. This cabin, this land, it's just wood and dirt. It doesn't matter without you. Nothing matters without you. Eleanor's eyes glistened. She squeezed his hand tightly. I won't let you sacrifice everything for me, Caleb. You don't get to decide that. He smiled slightly. We're married, remember? That means my sacrifices are your sacrifices, and yours are mine. We're in this together, all the way. She laughed softly, a real laugh, the first he'd heard from her since the auction. I forgot how stubborn you are. Runs in the family. He nodded toward the window where Lily's silhouette was visible playing some imaginary game with her doll. She gets it from both of us, I think. Eleanor followed his gaze. Her expression softened. She loves you already. I can see it. The way she looks at you, like you hung the moon. She's easy to love. She is. Eleanor paused. So are you. Caleb turned to her. In the fading light, she looked like she had 7 years ago, young, hopeful, full of dreams. The bruises were fading. The haunted look in her eyes was receding. Slowly, painfully, she was becoming herself again. Eleanor, he said quietly, I need to ask you something. Anything. When this is over, when Webb is dealt with and we're safe. He swallowed hard. Would you marry me again, properly this time? With Lily and Henry there? In front of the whole town if you want. I want to make it official. I want everyone to know you're my wife. Not because I bought you at an auction, but because you chose me. Because we chose each other. Eleanor's breath caught. For a long moment she didn't speak. Then she stood up, crossed the space between them, and lowered herself into his lap. Her arms wrapped around his neck. Her forehead pressed against his. Yes, she whispered. Yes, Caleb Thornton. I'll marry you again. Properly. With witnesses and vows and everything. But not because I want the world to know I'm your wife. Then why? She pulled back slightly, meeting his eyes. Because I want the world to know you're my husband. The best man I've ever known. The father of my children. The one who never stopped waiting, even when waiting made no sense. She kissed him, then soft and slow and full of promise. When they finally pulled apart, both of them were crying. I thought I'd never feel this again, Eleanor whispered. Happiness, safety, love. I thought those things were gone forever. They're not gone. Caleb wiped a tear from her cheek. They were just waiting. Like I was waiting. For you to come home. Inside, Lily appeared at the window, pressing her nose against the glass. "Mama," she called. "Mama, Henry's crying. I think he's hungry." Eleanor laughed, wet and messy and wonderful. "Duty calls," she said, climbing off Caleb's lap. "Go on, I'll be in soon." She paused at the door, looking back at him. "I love you, Caleb Thornton." "I love you too, Eleanor Thornton." She smiled, that smile he remembered from before, the one that had haunted his dreams for 7 years. Then she went inside, and Caleb sat alone on the porch, watching the last light fade from the sky. The storm was coming. He could feel it. But for the first time in longer than he could remember, he wasn't afraid. He had something worth fighting for. And that made all the difference. 2 weeks after Doc Ashford's visit, Ezra Webb made his move. Caleb was in the barn brushing down Penny when he heard the hoofbeats. 3 horses, maybe 4, coming up the ridge trail. He set down the brush, walked to the barn door, and watched them approach. 4 riders. Webb in front, wearing that same black duster from the auction, his bowler hat tilted low against the morning sun. Behind him, 3 men Caleb didn't recognize, hired muscle by the look of them. Hard faces, guns on their hips. Caleb stepped into the yard, positioning himself between the approaching riders and the cabin. His rifle leaned against the porch rail 15 feet away. Too far to grab quickly. He'd have to talk his way through this. Webb reined his horse to a stop 10 feet from Caleb. His smile was thin, practiced. "Mr. Thornton, we meet again." "Webb. I see you remember me. Good, that saves time." Webb dismounted, brushing dust from his coat with gloved hands. "I've come for what's mine." "Nothing here belongs to you." "I'm afraid the law disagrees." Webb reached into his coat and produced a folded document. "This is a writ of reclamation signed by Sheriff Rawlings. It states that the woman known as Eleanor Webb, formerly Eleanor Sullivan, and her 2 children are legally bound property of the Webb estate, held as collateral against unpaid debts incurred by my late brother Jonas." "Eleanor Webb." Caleb's voice was flat. "Her name is Eleanor Thornton. She's my wife. Has been for 8 years. Interesting claim. Do you have proof?" "Marriage certificate, filed in Kansas, 1874. Webb's smile widened. "Ah, yes. I heard about that. Unfortunately, Eleanor Thornton died in a fire in 1879. There's a death certificate to prove it. Which means whoever you purchased at that auction..." He tucked the document back into his coat. "She's not your wife. She's a debtor who bears a passing resemblance to a dead woman." Caleb felt his hands curl into fists. He forced them open. "That death certificate is a forgery. Eleanor was kidnapped the night of the fire, held against her will. Your brother bought a human being and called it legal." "Careful, Mr. Thornton." Webb's voice hardened. "My brother is dead. He can't defend himself against your accusations. But I can assure you every document in my possession is legitimate. Every transaction was lawful. The woman in your cabin is my property, and I intend to collect her." "Over my dead body." Webb tilted his head slightly. "That can be arranged." For a long moment, neither man moved. Then the cabin door opened. Eleanor stepped onto the porch. Her chin raised, her shoulders straight. Behind her, Caleb caught a glimpse of Lily's face in the window, pale, frightened, watching. "Mr. Webb," Eleanor said. Her voice was steady, but Caleb could see her hands trembling at her sides. "We need to talk." Webb's eyes lit up. "Ah, there she is. The runaway herself. My dear Eleanor, you've caused quite a bit of trouble." "I'm not your dear anything." Eleanor walked down the porch steps, moving to stand beside Caleb. "And I'm not your property. I never was." "The documents say otherwise." "The documents are lies. Every one of them. And I can prove it." Webb raised an eyebrow. "Can you now?" "I was kidnapped from a boarding house in Kansas on the night of April 17, 1879. 2 men drugged me and carried me out the back while the building burned. I was transported to Wyoming against my will and sold to your brother like cattle. I was held for 5 years. Beaten. Starved. Forced to work without pay. When Jonas died, you took ownership of me and my children without my consent. She took a step forward. Her voice rose. I have witnesses. I have testimony. I have a doctor's report documenting every scar, every healed fracture, every sign of abuse I suffered under your family's care. And I have a husband, my real husband, who happens to be a former circuit judge with 8 years of experience in territorial law. Webb's smile faltered, just slightly. But Caleb saw it. You think that matters, Webb said. You think a few sob stories and a sympathetic doctor will override legal documents signed by a county sheriff. I think, Eleanor said, that when this goes before a federal court, and it will go before a federal court, your documents won't hold up. Because they're forgeries. And forgery is a crime, Mr. Webb, a serious one. Federal court. Webb laughed. You're dreaming. No federal judge is going to take the word of a runaway debtor over a respectable businessman. Maybe not. But they might take the word of 3 other women. Webb went still. What did you say? Eleanor's eyes were cold. Hard. Caleb had never seen her look like this before. Your brother wasn't just collecting debts, Mr. Webb. He was collecting women. I wasn't the only one he bought, and I wasn't the only one he hurt. I've been writing letters, sending inquiries, and I've found 3 others who are willing to testify. 3 women who can confirm exactly what kind of operation your family was running. Webb's face darkened. The practiced smile was gone now, replaced by something uglier. You're bluffing. Am I? Eleanor reached into her apron pocket and produced a folded letter. This is from a woman named Sarah Jennings. She was held at the same house as me for 2 years before she managed to escape. She's in Nevada now. She's willing to travel for the trial. She held up another letter. This is from Martha Cole. She was sold to a rancher in Oregon after your brother decided she was too old to be useful. She remembers everything. A third letter. And this is from the sister of a woman named Rebecca Shaw. Rebecca didn't survive your brother's hospitality, Mr. Webb. But her sister has been gathering evidence for 3 years waiting for someone to come forward. Now someone has. Eleanor tucked the letters back into her pocket. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to get back on your horse. You're going to ride out of here. And you're never going to come near my family again. Because if you try to take me or my children, I will bring down the full weight of federal law on your head. I will destroy your reputation. I will take every penny you own. And I will make sure you spend the rest of your life in a prison cell. Silence. Webb stared at her. His jaw worked. His hands clenched and unclenched at his sides. Then he laughed. It was a cold sound, hollow. Well, he said. Well, Jonas always said you had fire. I didn't believe him until now. He mounted his horse, gathering the reins. You think you've won something here today, Mrs. Thornton, but you haven't. You've just made things harder for yourself. I have resources you can't imagine, friends in places you can't reach. This isn't over. Yes, it is, Eleanor said. You just don't know it yet. Webb's eyes moved from Eleanor to Caleb. Something flickered there, calculation maybe, or the first seeds of doubt. We'll see, he said softly. We'll see. He turned his horse and rode away, his men following. They disappeared down the ridge trail without looking back. Caleb didn't move until the hoofbeats faded entirely. Then he turned to Eleanor. 3 women, he said. She nodded. Her hands were shaking harder now, the adrenaline wearing off. You never told me you were writing letters. I wasn't sure anything would come of it. Didn't want to get your hopes up. Eleanor. He stepped closer, took her trembling hands in his. That was... I've never seen anything like that. You faced him down, made him back off. For now. Her voice cracked slightly. He'll be back. You heard him. He's not going to let this go. No. but neither are we. Caleb pulled her into his arms, held her tight. You were incredible. You know that. Absolutely incredible. Eleanor buried her face in his chest. I was terrified. Couldn't tell. Liar. He laughed a real laugh, warm and relieved. Maybe a little. But it doesn't matter. You stood up to him. You had evidence. You had a plan. Eleanor, you might have just saved this family. Not yet. She pulled back, looking up at him. This is just the beginning. We need to get those testimonies formalized. We need to file with the federal court. We need to build a case so strong that no one can tear it down. Then that's what we'll do. The cabin door burst open. Lily came running out, tears streaming down her face. Mama! Mama, are the bad men gone? Eleanor scooped her up, holding her close. They're gone, sweetheart. They're gone. Are they coming back? Maybe. But not today. And when they do come back, we'll be ready. Lily sniffled, wiping her nose on Eleanor's shoulder. You yelled at them. I saw. You were so brave, Mama. Your mama's the bravest person I know, Caleb said quietly. Eleanor looked at him over Lily's head. Her eyes were wet, but she was smiling. I learned from the best, she said. That afternoon they gathered around the kitchen table, Caleb, Eleanor, and Doc Ashford, who had ridden out as soon as he heard about Webb's visit. He'll petition the county court first, Ashford said, studying the letters Eleanor had shown him. Try to get a local ruling before you can escalate to federal jurisdiction. You need to move fast. How fast? Caleb asked. Days, not weeks. If he gets a county judge to sign off on reclamation papers before you file your counterclaim, he could show up with a legal posse. And at that point, resisting would make you outlaws, not him. Eleanor's face paled. Can he really do that? Webb has money and connections. He's done it before to others. The trick is getting ahead of him, filing first, making enough noise that the county court can't act without scrutiny. Caleb stood up, pacing. What do we need? Sworn affidavits from your witnesses, a formal petition to the federal court in Helena, documentation of Eleanor's identity, your marriage certificate, any letters or photographs from before the fire, and testimony from anyone who can verify she was taken against her will. The woman at the auction, Eleanor said suddenly. The one who recognized me. She said her sister worked at the house in Kansas. Do you know her name? No, but Ruth Brennan might. She seemed to know everyone in town. Caleb grabbed his coat. I'll ride to Cedar Hollow tonight, talk to Ruth, see if she can help us track down that woman. I'll come with you, Eleanor said. No, you need to stay here with the children. If Webb comes back, I want to be here to face him. Eleanor's jaw set. But you're right. Lily and Henry need me. She grabbed his arm. Be careful, please. Always am. Liar, she said again, but she was almost smiling. Caleb kissed her forehead, then Lily's, then Henry's sleeping face. Lock the doors, he said. Don't open for anyone you don't know. I'll be back before dawn. He rode out into the gathering dusk, his rifle across his saddle, his heart pounding with a mixture of fear and determination. The fight had officially begun. Ruth Brennan was closing up the general store when Caleb arrived. She looked up at the sound of hoofbeats, her eyes narrowing as she recognized him in the fading light. Mr. Thornton, bit late for shopping. Bit late for a lot of things. He dismounted, tying his horse to the post. I need your help, Mrs. Brennan. That's so. She crossed her arms, leaning against the doorframe. What kind of help? The woman at Webb's auction. The one who recognized my wife. She said her sister worked at a house in Kansas. Do you know who she is? Where I can find her? Ruth was quiet for a long moment. Her eyes searched his face. You're really going through with this, she said. Taking on Ezra Webb. Don't have a choice. Everyone has a choice, Mr. Thornton. Most people choose to keep their heads down and stay out of trouble. My wife spent 5 years being someone's property. My daughter was born in captivity. My son doesn't have a birth certificate because his mother was too scared to register him. Caleb's voice was steady, but there was steel beneath it. I'm done keeping my head down. I'm done letting men like Webb write the rules. Are you going to help me or not? Ruth studied him for another long moment. Then she sighed. Her name's Clara Whitfield. Lives about 2 miles east of town near the old Miller place. Her sister was Catherine Whitfield. Went missing 6 years ago. Everyone thought she'd run off, but Clara always said something wasn't right. Catherine, is she still alive? Don't know. Clara never found out what happened to her. But if anyone can tell you about that house in Kansas, it's Clara. Ruth paused. Fair warning, she's not exactly trusting of strangers, especially men. You might have better luck bringing your wife. Eleanor needs to stay with the children. Then bring Doc Ashford. Clara knows him, trusts him as much as she trusts anyone. Caleb nodded. Thank you, Mrs. Brennan. Don't thank me yet. She stepped back, starting to close the door. Webb's already been spreading talk around town. Says your wife's a criminal, a liar, a debtor trying to escape her obligations. Some folks believe him. Do you? Ruth paused, looked at him with those sharp, knowing eyes. I believe what I see, Mr. Thornton, and what I see is a man fighting for his family against someone who's used to getting whatever he wants. That takes courage. She smiled slightly. Or stupidity. Sometimes hard to tell the difference. Maybe both. Maybe so. She closed the door part way, then stopped. Watch your back on the ride home. Webb's got men patrolling the roads after dark. Looking for someone, though I couldn't say who. Caleb's jaw tightened. Thanks for the warning. Good luck, Mr. Thornton. You're going to need it. The door closed. The lock clicked. Caleb mounted his horse and rode toward Clara Whitfield's homestead, the darkness pressing in around him. Clara Whitfield lived alone in a cabin that looked like it was held together by stubbornness and prayer. When Caleb approached, a shotgun barrel appeared through a gap in the shutters before he could even dismount. That's far enough, stranger. Caleb raised his hand slowly. Mrs. Whitfield, my name's Caleb Thornton. Ruth Brennan sent me. Said you might be able to help. Ruth, huh? The shotgun didn't waver. Help with what? My wife, Eleanor Thornton. She was held at a house in Kansas. Same place your sister worked. We're building a case against Ezra Webb, and we need witnesses. Silence. Then slowly the shotgun withdrew. The door creaked open. Clara Whitfield was maybe 50, with gray-streaked hair pulled back in a severe bun and eyes that had seen too much. She looked Caleb up and down, assessing. Webb, she said. You're going after Ezra Webb. Yes, ma'am. You know what he does to people who cross him. I have an idea. Clara laughed, a harsh, humorless sound. No, you don't, but you'll learn. She stepped aside. Come in then. Might as well hear what you have to say. Inside the cabin was spare, but clean. Clara gestured to a chair by the cold fireplace and sat across from him, the shotgun across her knees. Your wife was at the Kansas house, she said. It wasn't a question. For 5 years. She was kidnapped and sold. Your sister, Catherine. Clara's voice caught on the name. She went to work there thinking it was a respectable position. Housekeeper, good wages. 3 months later, she stopped writing. When I went to check on her, they said she'd left. No forwarding address. Just gone. I'm sorry. Sorry doesn't bring her back. Clara's fingers tightened on the shotgun. But maybe making Webb pay for what his family did? Maybe that's something. Does that mean you'll help? Clara was quiet for a long moment. Her eyes drifted to a small daguerreotype on the mantel, a young woman with Clara's eyes smiling at the camera. I'll tell you what I know, she said finally. About the house, about the men who ran it, about the women who went in and never came out. I'll sign papers. I'll testify in court if it comes to that. It might. Then I'll be there. Clara looked at him, and for the first time, something like hope flickered in her eyes. "I've been waiting 6 years for someone to fight back. Thought it would never happen. Thought men like Webb were untouchable." "Nobody's untouchable," Caleb said. "Not when enough people stand up." "Pretty words. Hope they're true." "So do I." "Mrs. Whitfield." "So do I." They talked for another hour. Clara told him everything, names, dates, details that made Caleb's stomach turn. She described the house in Kansas, the men who ran it, the system of fake debts, and forged documents that kept women trapped for years. By the time Caleb left, he had enough information to bury Webb 10 times over. The question was whether anyone would listen. He rode home through the darkness, watching the shadows, listening for hoofbeats. Ruth's warning echoed in his mind. Webb's men were out there, watching, waiting. But they didn't find him. Or if they did, they let him pass. Dawn was breaking when Caleb finally reached the cabin. Eleanor was on the porch, wrapped in a blanket, her face pale with worry. "Thank God," she breathed when she saw him. "I was starting to think, I'm fine." He dismounted, walked up the steps, and pulled her into his arms. "Better than fine. I found Clara Whitfield. She's going to help. She knows everything about that house, Eleanor. Everything." Eleanor sagged against him with relief. "Then we have a chance." "We have more than a chance." Caleb pulled back, looking into her eyes. "We have a case. A real case. With witnesses and testimony and evidence. Webb isn't going to win this. I won't let him." "We won't let him," Eleanor corrected. "We won't let him," Caleb agreed. Inside, Lily was sleeping on the rug by the fire, curled up with her flour sack doll. Henry was in his cradle, breathing softly. The cabin was warm and quiet and safe. For now. But Caleb knew the storm wasn't over. It was just gathering strength. And when it finally broke, they would be ready. The federal courthouse in Helena was 3 days' ride from the cabin. Caleb left at dawn, carrying a leather satchel filled with everything they'd gathered, sworn affidavits from Clara Whitfield, Sarah Jennings, and Martha Cole. Doc Ashford's medical report documenting Eleanor's injuries. The original marriage certificate from Kansas, retrieved through a wire to the county clerk's office. Letters, testimonies, evidence of a system designed to enslave women under the cover of law. Eleanor stood on the porch, Henry in her arms, watching him go. "Come back to us," she said. "Always," he promised. Lily ran out at the last moment, throwing her arms around his leg. "Don't let the bad men get you, Papa." Caleb crouched down, meeting her eyes. "I won't. And when I come back, those bad men won't be able to hurt anyone anymore. You hear me? We're going to stop them. For good. Promise. Promise." He kissed her forehead, mounted his horse, and rode toward Helena with the weight of his family's future in his saddlebag. The journey was long and cold. Snow still clung to the mountain passes, and twice Caleb had to dismount and lead his horse through drifts that reached his thighs. He slept under the stars the first night, wrapped in his bedroll, listening to the wind howl through the pines. On the second night, he stopped at a way station, a rough wooden building that served as inn, saloon, and trading post for travelers crossing the territory. He paid for a meal and a corner to sleep in, keeping his satchel close. He was halfway through his stew when a man sat down across from him. Caleb looked up. The man was young, maybe 25, with a clean-shaven face and nervous eyes. He wore a deputy's badge on his coat. "You're Caleb Thornton," the man said. It wasn't a question. Caleb set down his spoon. "Who's asking?" "Name's Samuel Crane, deputy out of Ridgewood." The young man glanced around the room, then lowered his voice. "I've been looking for you." "That so?" "Yes, sir. I need to warn you." Crane leaned closer. "Ezra Webb's filed papers with the county court. Emergency reclamation order. Says your wife and children are flight risks and need to be taken into protective custody immediately." Caleb's blood went cold. "When?" "2 days ago. Sheriff Rawlings signed off on it. They're planning to ride out to your cabin tomorrow morning." Tomorrow? Caleb pushed back from the table, his mind racing. I'm 3 days from home. There's no way I can... I know. Crane's voice was urgent. That's why I came looking. My father was a circuit judge too back before the war. He used to talk about you. Said you were one of the honest ones. Said if the law ever needed saving, you'd be the man to do it. Your father was wrong. I walked away from the law a long time ago. But you came back. Crane met his eyes. That's what matters. And right now, the law is being used as a weapon against innocent people. Your wife, your children, others like them. Webb's been doing this for years, and nobody's been able to stop him. But you've got evidence. Real evidence. Enough to bring this whole thing down. Caleb stared at him. Why are you telling me this? You work for Rawlings. If he finds out you warned me, then I'll lose my badge. Maybe my life. Crane's jaw tightened. But I didn't become a lawman to help men like Webb steal women and children. I became a lawman because I believed in justice. The real kind. Not the kind you can buy with gold. Silence stretched between them. How long until Rawlings reaches my cabin? Caleb asked. They're leaving at first light. Your place is maybe 6-7 hours ride from town. So, midday tomorrow at the latest. And I'm 3 days away. Yes. Crane hesitated. But there might be another way. I'm listening. Crane pulled a folded paper from his coat. This is a federal injunction, pre-signed by Judge Harrison in Helena. It prohibits any local court from executing reclamation orders while a federal case is pending. Caleb took the paper, stared at it. How did you get this? I have a friend in the federal clerk's office. Owed me a favor. Crane's voice dropped even lower. The injunction is legitimate, but it's only valid if you file your federal case before Rawlings serves his papers. Right now, Webb's case is the only one on record. If you file first, the injunction kicks in. Rawlings can't touch them. Exactly. Caleb looked at the young deputy, at the fear in his eyes, the determination underneath it. Why are you risking everything for us? Crane was quiet for a moment. Then, because my sister was one of them. One of Webb's women. She died 2 years ago in his brother's house. They said it was fever. I never believed them. His voice cracked. I've been waiting for someone to fight back. Someone with the evidence and the courage to take this all the way. When I heard about what you were doing. He took a shaky breath. I knew this was my chance. To do something. To make her death mean something. Caleb reached across the table and gripped the young man's shoulder. What was her name? Elizabeth. Elizabeth Crane. I'll remember her. When this is over, I'll make sure everyone remembers her. Crane nodded, blinking back tears. Thank you. No. Caleb stood gathering his things. Thank you. You might have just saved my family. He rode through the night. The injunction was in his satchel, pressed against his chest. The cold bit at his face, and his horse was exhausted, but Caleb pushed on. Every hour he lost was an hour closer to Rawlings reaching his cabin. To Webb getting his hands on Eleanor and the children. He couldn't let that happen. By dawn, he'd reached the outskirts of Helena. The city was just waking up, smoke rising from chimneys, shopkeepers opening their doors, carriages beginning to rattle down the muddy streets. Caleb found the federal courthouse and tied his horse outside. His legs were numb. His hands were shaking. He'd been riding for 18 hours straight. None of that mattered. He walked up the steps, pushed through the heavy doors, and found the clerk's office. I need to file a federal case, he said, his voice hoarse. Emergency petition, now. The clerk, a thin man with spectacles and ink-stained fingers, looked up from his ledger. Sir, the court doesn't open for another... I don't care when the court opens. Caleb slammed his satchel on the counter, pulled out the stack of documents. There's a woman and 2 children about to be kidnapped by men with false papers. If I don't file this petition in the next hour, they're going to disappear into a system designed to destroy them. So I need you to process this. Right now. Today. Before it's too late." The clerk stared at him. At the documents. At the desperation in Caleb's eyes. Then he picked up the first affidavit and began to read. 20 minutes later, the petition was filed. Caleb held the stamped receipt in his hands, staring at it like it was made of gold. "The injunction is now active," the clerk said. "Any local reclamation orders are suspended pending federal review. If Sheriff Rawlings or anyone else tries to enforce them, they'll be in violation of federal law." "How do I get word to Rawlings before he reaches my cabin?" "Telegraph office is 2 blocks east. They can wire the sheriff's office in Cedar Hollow. He'll have the message within the hour." Caleb was already moving toward the door. "Mr. Thornton." He stopped, turned. The clerk was looking at him with something like respect. "I've been working in this office for 15 years. I've seen a lot of petitions come across my desk. Most of them are property disputes, land claims, business contracts." He paused. "This is the first one I've seen that might actually save lives." Caleb nodded slowly. "Let's hope it does." He sent the wire from the telegraph office, then found a stable where he could rest his horse and buy a fresh one. The new mount was a sturdy gray mare, not as fast as his own, but strong enough for the journey home. He ate standing up at a street vendor's cart bread and cheese and cold coffee, then climbed back into the saddle and headed for home. 3 days out, 3 days back. And somewhere in between, his family was either safe, or he couldn't think about the alternative. He just rode. The sun was setting on the second day when Caleb crested the ridge above his cabin. He pulled the mare to a stop, heart pounding. Smoke rose from the chimney. The windows glowed with lamplight. No strange horses in the yard. No signs of struggle. He let out a breath he hadn't known he was holding. But as he started down the trail, a figure emerged from behind the barn rifle raised. "That's far enough, mister." Caleb stopped. Raised his hands slowly. "Doc, is that you?" A pause. Then Doc Ashford stepped into the fading light, lowering his rifle. "Caleb, good Lord, man, you nearly got yourself shot. What are you doing here?" "Keeping watch." Ashford walked toward him, his face grim. "Rawlings came yesterday. 3 deputies with him. I was here when they arrived." Caleb's stomach dropped. What happened? They had papers. Reclamation orders signed and sealed. Rawlings was ready to take Eleanor and the children right then and there. But about an hour before they showed up, a wire came through to the sheriff's office. Federal injunction. Case pending in Helena. Rawlings read it 3 times, then crumpled it up and threw it in the mud. Ashford smiled grimly. But he couldn't ignore it, not with witnesses watching. He had to ride back to town empty-handed. Relief flooded through Caleb so hard his knees nearly buckled. Eleanor. The children. Inside, safe. Shaken up, but safe. Caleb dismounted and ran. He burst through the cabin door to find Eleanor standing by the fire. Henry in her arms, Lily pressed against her side. All 3 of them looked up as he entered. For a moment nobody moved. Then Lily broke free and hurled herself at him. "Papa! Papa! You came back!" Caleb caught her, lifted her, held her so tight she squeaked. "I told you I would." The bad men came, with guns and papers and everything. But they had to leave. They had to leave because of what you did. That's right. Caleb looked over Lily's shoulder at Eleanor, at the tears streaming down her face. They had to leave. He crossed the room in 3 strides and pulled Eleanor and Henry into his arms, all 4 of them tangled together in an embrace that said everything words couldn't. "I thought," Eleanor's voice broke. "When Rawlings showed up, I thought it was over. I thought we'd lost." "Never." Caleb pulled back, cupping her face in his hands. "I will never let them take you. Not ever. You understand me. This family stays together, no matter what." Eleanor nodded, tears still falling. "I understand." "Papa!" Lily tugged at his coat. "Does this mean we won?" Is it over? Caleb looked at Ashford, who had followed him inside. The doctor's expression was cautious. The injunction bought us time, Ashford said quietly. But Webb isn't going to give up. He'll challenge the federal case, hire lawyers, try to find loopholes. This fight isn't over yet. I know. Caleb straightened, keeping one arm around Eleanor, one hand on Lily's shoulder. But we're not running. We're not hiding. We're going to see this through to the end. And if the end doesn't go our way... Caleb looked at his family. At the woman he'd lost and found. At the daughter he'd never known. At the son who bore his name. It will, he said. It has to. Over the next few weeks, the case moved forward. Caleb made 2 more trips to Helena, meeting with lawyers, submitting additional evidence, preparing for the hearing that would determine everything. Eleanor wrote more letters, gathering testimonies from women across 3 territories. Clara Whitfield traveled to Helena herself, sitting in the federal clerk's office for an entire day, while she dictated every detail of her sister's disappearance. And slowly, the tide began to turn. Webb's lawyers filed motion after motion, trying to delay, dismiss, discredit. But the evidence was too strong, too consistent, too damning. 3 weeks after Caleb filed his petition, the federal court issued a preliminary ruling. Eleanor Thornton was not property. The debt documents filed by the Webb estate were fraudulent. A full investigation was ordered into the trafficking operation that had held her captive. When the news reached the cabin, Eleanor cried for an hour. But Webb wasn't finished. The night before the final hearing, Caleb was on the porch watching the stars when he heard hoofbeats on the ridge. He grabbed his rifle and stepped into the yard. A single rider approached, no weapons visible, hands raised. "That's far enough," Caleb called. The rider stopped, dismounted slowly. It was Webb. "I'm not here to fight," Webb said, his voice carrying across the cold air. "I'm here to negotiate." "There's nothing to negotiate." "I disagree." Webb walked closer, stopping just outside the ring of lamplight from the cabin. "Tomorrow the court is going to rule against me. I know that. My lawyers know that. The evidence your wife has gathered is impressive. I underestimated her. You underestimated a lot of things. Perhaps." Webb's eyes glittered in the darkness. "But here's what you haven't considered, Mr. Thornton. Even if the court rules in your favor, I won't stop. I have resources, connections, men who will do anything for the right price. I can make your life a living hell for years, decades. I can turn every town in this territory against you. I can make sure your daughter never finds a husband, your son never finds work. I can destroy you without ever setting foot in a courtroom." Caleb's grip tightened on his rifle. "Is that a threat?" "It's a fact." Webb smiled thinly. "Unless we come to an arrangement." "What kind of arrangement?" "You drop the federal case. I drop my claim on your wife and children. We both walk away, and nobody has to spend the next 20 years looking over their shoulder." Caleb stared at him. At this man who had bought and sold women like livestock, who had built a fortune on suffering, who stood here in the darkness offering peace like it was something he had the right to give. "No," Caleb said. Webb's smile faded. "Think carefully, Thornton. This is the best offer you're going to get." "I said no." Caleb stepped forward, rifle at his side. "You don't get to walk away from this, Webb. You don't get to pretend none of it happened. Tomorrow the court is going to rule that you and your brother ran a criminal enterprise, that you kidnapped women, forged documents, destroyed lives. And when that ruling comes down, everyone is going to know. Every newspaper, every courthouse, every town in the territory." His voice hardened. "You're finished, Webb. Not because I beat you, but because the truth beat you. And no amount of money or connections is going to change that." Webb's face contorted. For a moment, Caleb thought he might reach for a weapon, might try something desperate. But he didn't. Instead, he laughed. That same cold, hollow sound from their first meeting. "You think you've won," he said. "You think justice has prevailed. But justice is just a word, Thornton. A pretty idea that people like you cling to when they can't face reality. The reality is men like me always survive. We adapt. We find new opportunities. We rebuild. Maybe, but not here. Not anymore. Webb stared at him for a long moment. Then he turned, mounted his horse, and rode away without another word. Caleb watched until the hoofbeats faded into silence. Then he went inside, locked the door, and sat with his family until morning. The final hearing was held on a Tuesday. The courtroom was packed. Farmers and ranchers who'd traveled for days. Women who'd survived the same system Eleanor had. Journalists from 3 different newspapers. And in the front row, Clara Whitfield wearing her Sunday dress, her hands folded in her lap. Eleanor testified first. She told her story from the beginning, the fire, the kidnapping, the years of captivity. She described the house in Kansas, the men who ran it, the women who came and never left. She spoke calmly, clearly, without flinching, even when the defense attorney tried to rattle her. "Mrs. Thornton, isn't it true that you voluntarily entered into a labor contract with Jonas Webb?" "I never signed anything voluntarily. I was drugged and transported across state lines. Any documents bearing my signature are forgeries." "And yet you remained in Mr. Webb's household for 5 years. Why didn't you escape?" Eleanor's eyes met the attorney's. "Have you ever been beaten until you couldn't walk? Have you ever had your children threatened with starvation if you tried to run? Have you ever looked into the eyes of a man who owned you legally completely, and known that no one would help you if you screamed?" The attorney fell silent. "I stayed because I had no choice," Eleanor continued. "Because the system was designed to trap women like me. Because men with money and power wrote laws that turned us into property. But I never stopped fighting. I never stopped hoping. And now, thanks to my husband and the people who believed us, I finally have the chance to tell the truth." She looked at the judge. "That's all I'm asking for, Your Honor. The chance to tell the truth. And the hope that this court will listen." The judge listened. When the ruling came down, it was unanimous. Eleanor Thornton was declared a free citizen, never legally bound by any contract or debt. The documents filed by Ezra Webb were declared fraudulent. An arrest warrant was issued for Webb on charges of kidnapping, forgery, and human trafficking. And in a separate ruling that sent shockwaves through the territory, the court ordered a full investigation into the labor trafficking network that had operated for over a decade, victimizing dozens of women across 5 states. When the gavel fell, the courtroom erupted. People were shouting, crying, embracing. Clara Whitfield was on her knees sobbing into her hands. The journalists were scribbling furiously, already composing headlines. And in the middle of it all, Caleb and Eleanor stood together, holding each other, their children pressed between them. "We did it," Eleanor whispered. "We actually did it." "You did it." Caleb pulled back, looking at her. "You faced him down. You told your story. You never gave up. This was you, Eleanor. All of it." "It was us." She touched his face. "It's always been us." Lily tugged at Caleb's coat. "Papa, does this mean we're safe now? Really safe?" Caleb knelt down, meeting her eyes. "Yes, sweetheart, we're safe. No more bad men, no more running. Just us together for as long as we live." Lily threw her arms around his neck. "I love you, Papa." "I love you too, Lily. More than you'll ever know." Outside the courthouse, the sun was shining. Caleb stood on the steps, his family beside him, looking out at the crowd that had gathered. Faces he knew: Ruth Brennan, Doc Ashford, Clara Whitfield, and faces he didn't: strangers who had come to witness justice being served. A journalist approached, notebook in hand. "Mr. Thornton, the court has just issued a ruling that could change the lives of hundreds of women across the territory. What do you have to say?" Caleb looked at Eleanor, at Lily, at Henry sleeping peacefully in his mother's arms. "I say this was never about one family," he said slowly. "It was about all of them. Every woman who was taken, every child who was born in captivity, every person who was told they had no rights, no recourse, no hope." He paused. "Today the law told them they were wrong. Today the law said that money and power don't get to win just because they always have. And I hope—" his voice caught. "I hope that's a lesson this territory never forgets." Eleanor squeezed his hand. "Let's go home," she said softly. Caleb nodded. They walked down the courthouse steps together into the sunlight, into the future they'd fought so hard to claim. And for the first time in 7 years, Caleb Thornton believed that maybe, just maybe, justice was real after all. Spring came early that year. The snow melted fast, running down the mountain in silver streams that fed the valley below. Wildflowers pushed through the muddy earth, purple and yellow and white, and the air smelled of pine and new growth and something that felt suspiciously like hope. Caleb stood on the porch, watching Lily chase a butterfly through the meadow. She was barefoot now. Her feet healed, her laughter ringing across the open land like music. Behind her, Eleanor sat on a blanket with Henry, who had learned to roll over and was practicing enthusiastically, giggling every time he succeeded. 3 months since the trial. 3 months since Ezra Webb was arrested and charged with crimes that would keep him in prison for the rest of his natural life. 3 months since the newspapers had carried the story across 6 territories, sparking investigations and rescues and a reckoning that was still unfolding. And 3 months since Caleb had finally allowed himself to believe that the nightmare was over. "You're thinking too loud again." He turned. Doc Ashford was walking up the path from the barn, his medical bag in one hand, a bottle of whiskey in the other. "Brought you something," the old doctor said, holding up the bottle. "Figured we earned a celebration." "Bit early in the day for drinking, isn't it?" "Caleb, I'm 63 years old. At my age, every hour is a good hour for drinking." Ashford settled into the rocking chair beside him. "Besides, I got news. Thought you'd want to hear it." "Good news or bad news?" "Good. Very good." Ashford uncorked the bottle, took a sip, and handed it over. "They found her." Caleb froze. "Found who?" "Catherine Whitfield, Clara's sister. She's alive." The bottle nearly slipped from Caleb's fingers. "What?" "She was being held at a ranch in Oregon, part of the network that Webb's brother set up years ago. When the federal investigators started digging, they found records shipping manifests really of women being moved between properties. Catherine was on one of those lists." Ashford's voice softened. "She's in bad shape, Caleb. Years of— well, you can imagine. But she's alive, and she's free. Clara left for Oregon 2 days ago to bring her home." Caleb sat down heavily in the other rocking chair. His hands were shaking. "After 6 years, he said quietly. "Clara never gave up, never stopped looking." "No, she didn't." Ashford took another sip. "There's a lesson in that, I think. About hope. About what happens when you refuse to let the darkness win." Caleb looked out at the meadow, at Lily catching her butterfly and holding it gently in cupped hands, at Eleanor lifting Henry into the air and making him laugh. "Yeah," he said. "I think I know what you mean." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, passing the bottle back and forth. Then Ashford said, "There's something else. Something I need to ask you." "Go ahead." "The territorial governor is looking to appoint new circuit judges. The old system was corrupted. Too many men like Rawlings who cared more about money than justice. They're rebuilding from scratch." Ashford paused. "Your name came up." Caleb's jaw tightened. "I'm not a judge anymore." "You could be, but people trust you, Caleb. After what you did, after what you and Eleanor did, folks see you as someone who actually cares about right and wrong. The governor's office received over 200 letters recommending you for the position. 217 to be precise. I wrote one of them." Ashford smiled slightly. "Ruth Brennan wrote 3. Under different names, but I recognized her handwriting." Caleb shook his head slowly. "I walked away from the law, Doc. After Eleanor. After what I thought happened to her. I couldn't do it anymore. Couldn't believe in a system that had failed so completely. And now—" Caleb was quiet for a long moment. "Now I don't know." he admitted. Part of me thinks the system is broken beyond repair, that men like Webb will always find ways to twist the law to their advantage. And the other part. He looked at his family, at everything he'd almost lost, and somehow miraculously found again. The other part thinks maybe that's exactly why good people need to stay in the fight. Because if we all walk away, who's left? Ashford nodded slowly. That sounds like a man who's already made up his mind. Does it? It does to me. The old doctor stood up, stretching his back with a groan. Think about it, Caleb. That's all I'm asking. The territory needs men like you, men who remember what justice is supposed to mean. He tipped his hat and walked back toward the barn, leaving Caleb alone with his thoughts. That evening, after Lily was asleep and Henry was fed and settled, Caleb and Eleanor sat together by the fire. It had become their ritual this quiet time after the children were down, when they could talk about things that mattered. Sometimes they discussed the future. Sometimes they revisited the past. Sometimes they just sat in silence, grateful for each other's presence. Tonight, Caleb told her about Ashford's offer. Eleanor listened without interrupting. When he finished, she was quiet for a long moment, her eyes on the flames. "What do you want to do?" she asked finally. "I don't know. That's why I'm asking you." "Caleb." She turned to face him. "This isn't my decision to make." "Yes, it is. Everything I do affects this family. If I go back to being a judge, I'll be gone for weeks at a time, traveling between towns, hearing cases, making enemies of powerful people." He took her hand. "After everything we've been through, I won't do that unless you're with me. Completely." Eleanor studied his face. Her thumb traced circles on the back of his hand. "Do you remember what you said to me the night before you left for Helena, the first time?" "I said a lot of things that night." "You said the law had failed us, that justice was a lie, that fighting only brought pain to the people you loved." She paused. "Do you still believe that?" Caleb thought about it, really thought about it. "No," he said slowly. "I believed it then because I was broken, because I'd lost you, and I blamed myself, and I couldn't see any other explanation except that the whole system was rotten. And now I think I was wrong. Not about the system being flawed, it is, but about what that means. The law isn't perfect because people aren't perfect. It can be twisted, corrupted, used as a weapon. But it can also be fixed, strengthened, made to serve the people it was designed to protect." He looked at her. "Webb used the law to hurt you, to hurt dozens of women. And for years he got away with it because the men who were supposed to enforce justice were either blind or bought. But when we finally got our case in front of a real court with real evidence, the law worked. It protected you. It punished him. It made things right." "So the law isn't the problem," Eleanor said quietly. "The people enforcing it are." "Exactly. And if good people keep walking away, if everyone who cares about justice throws up their hands and says it's too broken to fix, then the Webbs of the world win by default." Eleanor was quiet for a long moment. Then she smiled. "You sound like a judge," she said. "Is that a bad thing?" "No." She leaned forward and kissed him softly. "It's the best thing. It's the man I married. The man I always knew you were, even when you'd forgotten it yourself." "So you think I should accept?" "I think you should do whatever your conscience tells you. But if you're asking for my blessing?" She took his face in her hands. "You have it, completely. Whatever you decide, I'll be beside you. Always." Caleb pulled her into his arms and held her close. "I love you," he whispered into her hair. "More than I could ever say." "I know." She nestled against his chest. "I've always known." The next morning, Caleb rode to Cedar Hollow and sent a wire to the territorial governor's office. He accepted the appointment. The news spread quickly. Within a week, people were stopping by the cabin to congratulate him. Neighbors, He barely knew strangers who'd read about the trial families who'd been touched by the investigation that followed. They brought food gifts, good wishes. Some brought stories of their own sisters and daughters, and wives who had disappeared into the same shadow system that had claimed Eleanor. Caleb listened to every one. He wrote down names, dates, details. He promised to investigate, to follow up, to keep fighting until every woman who could be found was found, and every man responsible was held accountable. It was overwhelming, exhausting, and exactly what he was meant to do. One afternoon, Ruth Brennan appeared at the cabin with a basket of fresh bread and a look of determination on her face. "I need to talk to you," she said, bypassing Caleb entirely and walking straight to Eleanor. The two women sat on the porch while Caleb kept Lily occupied in the barn. "I was wrong about you," Ruth said bluntly. "When you first came here, I didn't know what to think. Strange woman, strange circumstances, and the whole town buzzing with Webb's lies." She shook her head. "I should have trusted my instincts, should have seen what was right in front of me." Eleanor's voice was gentle. "You helped us, Ruth. You warned Caleb about Webb's men. You gave him Clara's name. Without you, without me, you still would have found a way. You're the strongest woman I've ever met, Eleanor Thornton. And I'm not just saying that because your husband's a judge now." Ruth's expression softened. "I'm saying it because I watched you stand up to a monster and win. Because I've seen the way you love those children. Because even after everything that was done to you, you still have kindness in your heart." She reached out and took Eleanor's hand. "I want you to know that you have a place in this town. A real place. Not just as the judge's wife, but as yourself. And if anyone gives you trouble or looks at you sideways or whispers behind your back, they'll answer to me. You hear?" Eleanor blinked back tears. "I hear." "Good." Ruth stood up, brushing off her skirts. "Now, the town's planning a spring festival next month. We need someone to organize the children's games. I told them you'd do it." "You did?" "I did. Problem with that?" Eleanor laughed, a real full laugh that rang across the yard. "No. No problem at all." "Good. I'll send you the details tomorrow." Ruth started down the porch steps, then stopped. "One more thing." "Yes." "Your daughter's been teaching the Miller boy his letters. Did you know that?" "What?" "Jimmy Miller. Lives about a mile north. 8 years old, never been to school. Lily's been meeting him by the creek every afternoon, showing him how to write his name in the dirt." Ruth smiled. "That girl's got her mother's heart. Don't let anyone tell her otherwise." She walked away before Eleanor could respond. That evening, Eleanor asked Lily about Jimmy Miller. "He's my friend," Lily said simply, not looking up from the picture she was drawing. "His papa doesn't let him go to school because they need him for chores, but he really wants to learn to read. So I'm teaching him." "That's very kind of you, sweetheart." "It's not kind." Lily finally looked up, her expression serious. "It's fair. I got to learn because you taught me. Jimmy should get to learn too. Everybody should." Eleanor's throat tightened. She pulled Lily into her arms. "You're right," she whispered. "Everybody should." That night she told Caleb about the conversation. "She's remarkable," Caleb said. 4 years old and already fighting for justice in her own way. "She gets it from you." "No." Caleb shook his head. "She gets it from you. You're the one who taught her that everyone deserves a chance. That nobody should be left behind just because of circumstances they can't control." Eleanor was quiet for a moment. "I want to start a school," she said suddenly. "What?" "A school. Here in Cedar Hollow. For children who can't afford the regular schooling or whose families need them for work during the day. Evening lessons, weekend sessions, whatever it takes to give them the chance they deserve." Caleb stared at her. "You're serious?" "Completely." Her eyes were shining. "I was a teacher once, Caleb. Before everything. I loved it. I was good at it. And I've been thinking all those years I was held captive. I kept wondering what I would do if I ever got free, what my purpose would be, what mark I could leave on the world. She took his hand. This is it. This is what I'm meant to do. I can't undo what happened to me, but I can help make sure that other children like Lily, like Jimmy, like all the ones who never got a chance, I can help make sure they have the tools to build better lives. Caleb looked at her, at the fire in her eyes, at the strength that had carried her through 5 years of captivity and never once broken. Then do it, he said. I'll help however I can. Money, materials, whatever you need. But this is your vision, Eleanor, your dream, and I'll be damned if anything stops you from making it real. She threw her arms around him. I love you, she said fiercely. I love you so much it scares me sometimes. Good. He held her tight. That makes 2 of us. The school opened 3 months later. It wasn't much at first, just a corner of the church basement, borrowed chairs, a chalkboard Caleb built with his own hands. But Eleanor filled it with warmth and patience and the unshakable belief that every child who walked through the door could become something extraordinary. They came slowly at first. Jimmy Miller. 2 girls from the lumber camp whose father worked 16-hour days. A boy with a clubfoot who'd been told he was too slow to learn. A girl who didn't speak English and had been hiding in the shadows of the town for months. Eleanor taught them all. She taught them letters and numbers. She taught them history and geography. She taught them that their circumstances did not define their worth. That poverty was not a sentence, that every human being had a spark inside them that deserved to be kindled. And slowly, the town began to change. Parents who'd been skeptical started dropping by, curious about what their children were learning. Shopkeepers who'd never spoken to Eleanor before began nodding to her on the street. The women's sewing circle invited her to join. The church asked her to help with the Sunday school. The whispers faded. The stares stopped. And in their place grew something that looked a lot like respect. You've done something remarkable, Caleb told her one evening, watching her grade papers by lamplight. This town wasn't ready for you, but you made them ready. I didn't do anything, Eleanor said, not looking up. I just showed up, kept showing up. Eventually people see who you really are. Is that your secret? Just keep showing up. It's not a secret. She finally looked at him, smiling. It's just stubbornness. I learned it from my husband. On a clear morning in late summer, exactly 1 year after Caleb had bought Eleanor at the Blackwater auction, the Thornton family gathered on the ridge above their cabin. Caleb had insisted on it. He wanted to mark the day, not as an anniversary of suffering, but as a celebration of survival, of everything they'd overcome, of everything they'd become. They walked up the trail together, Caleb carrying Henry, who was crawling now and getting into everything. Eleanor holding Lily's hand. Doc Ashford trailing behind, complaining about his knees, but refusing to be left behind. At the top of the ridge they stopped. The valley spread out below them, green and gold in the summer light. The cabin sat nestled among the trees, smoke rising from the chimney. In the distance, they could see Cedar Hollow, the church steeple catching the sun. It's beautiful, Lily whispered. I never knew the world had so much pretty in it. It does, Eleanor said, pulling her close. Sometimes you just have to climb high enough to see it. Caleb set Henry down on a blanket and stood beside his wife, looking out at everything they'd built. 1 year ago, he said quietly, I was a ghost, living in that cabin, talking to shadows, waiting to die. I'd given up on everything, hope, justice, love. I thought my life was over. He turned to Eleanor, and then a little girl walked up to me in the snow and asked me to buy her family, and everything changed. Eleanor's eyes glistened. Caleb, let me finish. He took her hands. I spent 7 years grieving you, 7 years believing I'd failed you, 7 years punishing myself for something that wasn't my fault, and all that time you were fighting, surviving, keeping our daughter alive, holding on to hope when you had every reason to let it go. His voice broke. I didn't save you, Eleanor. You saved me. You and Lily and Henry, you gave me back my life. You gave me something worth fighting for, something worth living for." He reached into his pocket and pulled out the ring, his mother's ring, the one he'd given her months ago, the night they'd first talked about rebuilding their marriage. "I know we're already married, legally, officially, in every way that matters, but I want to do this right. I want to stand in front of our family and our friends, and the God I stopped believing in and started believing in again, and I want to make you a promise." He got down on one knee. "Eleanor Margaret Thornton, will you marry me again, in front of everyone? So the whole world knows that this family was built on love, and nothing will ever tear it apart." Eleanor was crying now, laughing and crying at the same time. "Yes," she said. "Yes, you stubborn, wonderful, impossible man. Yes, I'll marry you, again, as many times as you want." Caleb stood and pulled her into his arms. Lily squeezed between them, demanding to be included. Henry gurgled happily on his blanket. Doc Ashford wiped his eyes and pretended it was allergies. And on that ridge in the summer sunshine, surrounded by everything they'd almost lost and somehow found again, the Thornton family held each other close. The wedding was held a month later, not in a church. Eleanor said she'd spent too many years feeling judged by people in pews. Instead, they gathered on the same ridge where Caleb had proposed, with wildflowers scattered across the grass and the valley spread out below like a blessing. Half the town came. Ruth Brennan stood in the front row crying openly and not caring who saw. Clara Whitfield was there too, her sister Catherine beside her, frail and quiet, but alive. Doc Ashford served as best man despite his protests that he was too old for such nonsense. Lily was the flower girl scattering petals with aggressive enthusiasm. Henry was the ring bearer, though he mostly just chewed on the ribbon they'd tied to his wrist. And at the center of it all stood Caleb and Eleanor, holding hands, looking at each other like they were the only two people in the world. The pastor, a young man who'd traveled from Helena specifically for the occasion, read the traditional vows. But when he asked if they had anything to add, Caleb stepped forward. "I do," he said. He turned to Eleanor. "I've given a lot of speeches in my life, handed down a lot of rulings, said a lot of words that were supposed to matter, but none of them meant as much as the ones I'm about to say now." He took a deep breath. "Eleanor, I promise to stand beside you, not in front of you, not behind you, but beside you, as your partner, your equal, your best friend. I promise to fight for you when you're too tired to fight for yourself, and to step back when you need to fight your own battles. I promise to love our children, the ones we have, and any others who might come, with everything I am. I promise to build a life with you that's worthy of everything we survived to get here." His voice dropped to a whisper. "And I promise that I will never, ever stop being grateful. For you. For us. For every single day we get to spend together." Eleanor was crying too hard to speak at first, but she gathered herself, wiped her eyes, and took his hands. "Caleb Thornton," she said, "I spent 5 years believing I would never be free, that I would die in chains, and no one would even know my real name. I survived because of Lily, because I couldn't leave her alone in that darkness. But I never imagined, never dared to hope that I would find you again." She squeezed his hands. "You didn't just rescue me from an auction block. You rescued me from despair. You showed me that the world still had goodness in it, that love wasn't a memory, it was alive, waiting, ready to welcome me home." She stepped closer. "I promise to love you for as long as I breathe, to stand beside you in every fight, every challenge, every quiet moment by the fire. I promise to be your wife, your partner, your home, and I promise—" Her voice broke, then steadied. "I promise that I will never stop believing in us, in our family, in the life we're building together." The pastor smiled. "Then, by the power vested in me, I am honored to pronounce you husband and wife, again. Caleb, you may kiss your bride." Caleb pulled Eleanor into his arms and kissed her like it was the first time, like it was the last time, like it was every time in between rolled into one perfect moment. The crowd cheered. Lily jumped up and down, shouting that she wanted cake. Henry clapped his hands together, not understanding what was happening, but sensing it was good. And on that ridge, surrounded by friends and family and the wide Montana sky, the Thorntons began their new life. Not as survivors, not as victims, but as a family whole and unbroken, forged in fire and redeemed by love. Years later, people would tell the story of Caleb and Eleanor Thornton. They would tell it in schoolhouses and courtrooms, in churches and saloons, wherever people gathered to talk about justice and hope and the power of refusing to give up. They would tell how a lonely cowboy bought a woman at an auction and discovered she was the wife he'd mourned for 7 years. How they fought a corrupt system and won. How they built a school that educated hundreds of children and a legacy that transformed an entire territory. They would tell how Eleanor Thornton became known as the mother of Cedar Hollow, beloved by generations of students who carried her lessons into the world. How Caleb Thornton served as circuit judge for 23 years, earning a reputation as the fairest and most incorruptible lawman in the West. They would tell how Lily grew up to become a doctor, one of the first women to practice medicine in Montana. How Henry became a lawyer who spent his career defending the defenseless. How the Thornton name became synonymous with justice, compassion, and unwavering love. But most of all, they would tell this, that on a cold winter day in 1882, a little girl with bare feet and a baby in her arms walked up to a stranger and asked him to save her family. And he did. Not because he was a hero, not because he was special, but because he chose to see her, to hear her, to believe that her life mattered. And in that choice, that single simple world-changing choice, he found his way back to everything he'd lost. Back to hope, back to justice, back to love. The Thornton cabin still stands today, weathered but whole on the ridge above Cedar Hollow. Visitors come from miles around to see it, to stand where Caleb and Eleanor stood, to imagine the life they built, to carry a piece of their story home. And if you listen closely, they say you can still hear them. Lily's laughter ringing across the meadow. Henry's first words babbled into his mother's ear. Eleanor's voice teaching children who had been told they would never learn. Caleb's steady presence, a promise kept, a love that never died. They are gone now, all of them. But what they built remains. A legacy of courage, a testament to hope, a reminder that even in the darkest winter, spring always comes. And love, true love, the kind that survives fire and separation and 7 years of silence, love always finds its way home.